Hello and welcome to Cleveland Classic Cinema. Today's movie is 1934's Maniac, directed by Dwayne Esper. Dwayne Esper was pretty much nothing but a carnival huckster who got into the movie game by accident when he was awarded a film lab as settlement on a debt. He discovered that even during the Depression, people without 2 dimes to rub together would find a way to see a movie if the subject matter was titillating enough. Esper took advantage of this so blatantly that fellow exploitation producers thought him an embarrassment, which is akin to being considered too intolerant to join the KKK. He soon started turning out films such as The Seventh Commandment, Will It Happen Again, aka The Love Life of Adolf Hitler, Narcotic, and the film you'll see today, Maniac. All of his films contain the same elements: rancid dialogue, horrendous acting, and I mean horrendous acting, like nothing you've ever seen before.
Stealing through my body, creeping through my veins, pouring in my blood. Oh, darts of fire in my brain, stabbing me. Agony! I can't stand this torture, this torment. I can't stand it. I won't.
It's something unique to Esper films. They usually contain long text explanations of what you're supposedly seeing. These were added in order to justify inclusion of the myriad exploitative elements in his films by giving them an educational spin, even if they had nothing to do with what the audience was watching. Before I continue, let me tell you a little bit about the history of exploitation movies and one master of it in particular. There's always been a lot of moaning and complaining about the amount of sex and violence in movies and on TV. The latest is, of course, the Janet Jackson costume malfunction debacle, but it goes a lot farther back than that. In his excellent book, Profoundly Disturbing, Joe Bob Briggs tells us that in 1913, a playwright by the name of Eugene Breaux wrote Damaged Goods. It was about a young lawyer who contracts syphilis from a streetwalker while drunk at his bachelor party, ignores the advice of his doctor, and marries his intended in order to get at her dowry, thereby infecting his wife and baby. It avoided local censorship boards by being presented through a medical organization in the guise of an educational play, and was committed to film by Mutual Studios in 1914, eventually bringing in more than $2 million. At the time, this was an absolutely unheard of amount of money, especially when you consider that your average movie ticket cost about 5 cents. A rip-off film called Victim of Sin came out almost immediately, and by 1920, more than 20 more VD movies had hit the streets. All of these pictures followed the example set by Damaged Goods by presenting themselves as educational movies in order to avoid local censorship boards. Apart from the obvious reasons, this was necessary because every local censorship board had its own set of standards. If a producer had to cut his film in order to meet the requirements of every single local board, it would not only cost a fortune, but the movie would never make it to the screen. The industry dubbed these films clap operas, and by the end of the Second World War, 2 Army training films called Fit to Fight and another called The End of the Road, which included disgustingly graphic images of venereal disease victims in loving close-up, were purchased by producer Isaac Silverman and released in theaters. Soon the Catholic Legion of Decency and local morals crusaders managed to get the films banned in many cities. Silverman skirted this move by showing the film in adults-only shows, meaning no one under 16 would be admitted, and went one further by segregating the showings according to gender. This was, of course, just code for letting the public know that a hot movie was in town. You have to remember that this was before television, and the only forms of entertainment available to the public were radio and movies. So if something like this popped up at a local theater, you went to see it no matter what. Since women would be too embarrassed to see a movie about VD in the company of men, women-only shows would be screened at 2 and 7 p.m. By the time of the men-only showing, the men would be so rabidly curious about the content of the film that they just about stampede the theater. Hollywood got tired of battling the local censorship boards, and so in 1921, they adopted the 13 points and standards list. Among the things on this list were the on-screen depictions of illicit love and sex, white slavery, nudity, use of narcotics, miscegenation, vulgarity, use of profanity, and ridicule of religion. In 1927, this evolved into the Don't and Be Careful list, which added depictions of sexual hygiene, venereal disease, childbirth scenes, and children's sex organs. In 1930, all of these rules, which were pretty much adhered to by unspoken agreement, became official with the establishment of the production code. 98% of the movies released were judged and censored by the Breen Office, a government agency headed by Joseph Breen. In order to get a general release, a movie was required to have the production code seal. No seal, no general release, no advertising in papers or on radio. The 2% that didn't submit to the Breen Office had to find another way to advertise and get their movies into theaters. What they did was take the movies on the road themselves. About 2 or 3 weeks before the premiere, an advance group would come into a town or city and put posters up all over the place advertising whichever movie they were bringing in. Word of mouth would build to just about a fever pitch by the time the movie hit town, and the exhibitors would use what was called four-walling in theaters. That is, they would rent the theater outright for the extent of the movie's run and keep all the profits made. They brought in their own ushers, projectionists, and people to run the popcorn stand. The absolute king of the roadshow movie was a man by the name of Kroger Babb. David Friedman, no mean exploitation maven himself, called Babb's roadshow exploitation of the 1945 film Mom and Dad the biggest and best organized bunco game in American show business history. Babb's career pretty much involved running up to 26 Mom and Dad roadshow units from his headquarters in Worthington, Ohio. He had to fight censorship boards, police forces, judges, and clergy throughout his career. Mom and Dad was involved in over 400 court proceedings during its life. Mom and Dad was a film about an unwanted pregnancy. It was about as melodramatic and exploitative as any other roadshow film produced, and it ran continuously for an incredible 23 years, well into 1977. The posters for the film, which read a lot like a Carnival Barker spiel, proclaimed, "Once in a lifetime comes a presentation that truly pulls no punches. Now you can see the motion picture that dares discuss and explain sex as never before seen and heard. The one, the only, the original, Mom and Dad. Truly the world's most amazing attraction. No one under high school age admitted unless accompanied by parents. Everything shown, everything explained." Tagged onto this in a separate box was the announcement, "Extra, in person, Elliot Forbes, The Secrets of Sensible Sex." As Joe Bob Briggs describes him in profoundly disturbing, Elliot Forbes, an eminent sexual hygiene commentator, would stride onto the stage and deliver a 20-minute lecture on the need for openness in sex education, the morality of the times, the biology of the body, and what the community can do to avoid the ruination of its youth. If anyone checked the credentials of Elliot Forbes, he would have discovered that the speaker was the busiest man in the history of the lecture circuit, appearing 78 times a day in cities scattered from Maine to Oregon. There were actually 26 Elliot Forbeses, one for each road show, and Babb hired most of them from the ranks of retired or underemployed vaudeville comedians. They knew how to work crowds with a combination of earnestness, humor, and down-home just folks patter that would always crescendo at the moment when he held up 2 paperback books, one called Man and Boy, the other called Woman and Girl, and made a spiel for a set of these vitally important books to be read in the privacy of your own home. 2 women in nurse uniforms, supposedly stationed in the theater to take care of people who fainted or had heart attacks, would then pass among the crowd, collecting money and distributing the volumes. The books themselves were rehashes of venereal disease and pregnancy information that could be obtained at any public health agency. The Elliot Forbes speech was what is known in the carnival world as a blow-off, long used in 10-in-1 freak shows to hustle additional money from people who had already paid an admission price. In any good blow-off, there's the constant implication that the good stuff is the attraction that you haven't paid for yet. In this case, the book. Forbes' main job was to sell the books, which frequently augmented the box office take by as much as 50%. In 1957, for example, at a 4-week showing of Mom and Dad in Baltimore, the box office gross was $82,000, but 45,000 copies of the books were sold, resulting, after deducting printing and expenses, in a $31,000 additional profit. If you're interested in the full story of Kroger Babb and his movie Mom and Dad, I suggest you pick up the book Profoundly Disturbing by Joe Bob Briggs. It's a fascinating read. Bill Woods, who appears as Don Maxwell, appeared in 3 movies during his mercifully short career. This one, Marijuana, another Dwayne Esper classic, and an uncredited role in Headin' for the Rio Grande in 1936. Horace B. Carpenter, who appears as Dr. Meerschaultz, appeared in an incredible 308 movies, starting with 1914's The Attic Above and ending with 1946's Sun City Cyclone. About 96% of his roles were uncredited walk-ons, and once you watch Maniac, you'll understand why. He was born on January 31st, 1875 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and entered films in the famous Players Lasky troupe. He died on May 21st, 1945 in Hollywood, California. Ted Edwards, who plays Buckley and has probably the most memorable role in the movie, as the man accidentally injected with rabid dog blood, appeared in 4 movies over the course of his career, beginning with 1918's A Dog's Life and ending with 1939's Polygamy. I could give you the dates of his birth and death, but who cares? Mrs. Buckley is played by Phyllis Diller, who appeared in 2 movies, 1920's Over the Hill to the Poorhouse and this one. And no, she's not that Phyllis Diller. The plot of Maniac is as follows. An hysterically overacting mad doctor is determined to bring the dead back to life and has his assistant, a bad stage actor, steal a recently deceased body from the morons running the local morgue. He brings back the body of a young girl who committed suicide, and when the doctor runs the experiment, it's a success. Something screws up and the doctor demands that the actor die so he, the doctor, can revive him. The actor kills the doctor and takes his place with a disguise. A woman brings her somnambulist husband to the fake doctor, who injects him with blood from a rabid dog. This is probably stored next to the bottle of sulfuric acid that every mad doctor has sitting on a shelf. And the husband goes mad, kidnaps the revived corpse, and runs off raving like a lunatic. Meanwhile, the actor's gold-digger wife discovers that the actor has inherited a ton of money, and she intends to get her hands on it. When she tracks him down, the actor convinces the rabid guy's wife to kill his gold-digging mate, and they have this big cat fight with hypodermic needles. Add to this mess a subplot involving a man who owns a lot of cats, his landlady, and a cop looking for the actor, I think, and you have Maniac. To sum up, Maniac is an incoherent mess of a movie. It makes so little sense that, in comparison, the plot of The Beast of Yucca Flats is crystal clear. Now that you've been warned, sit back, relax, and try to make more sense than I was able to out of Maniac, right here on Cleveland Classic Cinema.